Okay, I was born in Egypt, in Cairo, one of 7 siblings, 6 boys and a girl in the middle. And the 3 older boys, our mother tongue was French. We went to French school and also had Arabic as a second language. And as we were growing up, my dad realized that things were becoming quite restrictive, as Egypt was trying to shake off the colonial past and assert their own identity. So my father saw that we were going to be limited in education, in what we could study, and he wanted us to be, at least have some kind of future, with either English or French. At the time, France and Egypt were not on very good terms, so he ended up choosing England, and happened to have his brother living in Manchester, who was quite good to have, because we would go up occasionally to Manchester for the holidays.
But your parents stayed?
They stayed in Egypt, and progressively they became more subject of discrimination. I mean, I'll just give you an example. At the time, we were born in the house, with a lady comes along, and so the three of us who were born in the same house. At what point we were given 48 hours to leave the house, because no Jews were allowed to live within 1 kilometer of the king's palace. So we just had to go to central Cairo in an apartment, things like that. Then in 1961, my father's businesses were nationalized.
What business?
He was in the textile business. He had factories producing yarns, a significant portion of Egyptian yarn production. And just overnight it was nationalized. He was given a worthless piece of paper that didn't amount to much. Even he went back 30 years later and found that there was nothing to be done with that. So in that context, he decided, because of the English and because of my uncle's proximity, he decided to send us to England. I remember arriving in Tilbury on Guy Fawkes Day, when all the fireworks were going on, and my uncle drove us to 3 different. There were 3 different Jewish schools at the time. One in Hove called Area House. There was one in Wallingford, which was called Carmel College, and then there was Whittinghame College. We drove through with my uncle, and I'm glad in hindsight that we ended up going to Whittinghame College, because what I understood from meeting people who had been to Carmel College, they were very, 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 very religious, very dogmatic in their thinking, whereas Whittingham was more of a laissez-faire kind of approach, and that was reflected in all the way the teachers taught us the spirit of the Judaism, as opposed to just blindly follow the rules.
And how did you find settling into Whittinghame when you first arrived?
When you're a 10-year-old boy and you live in the context of children should be seen and not heard, you kind of just keep to yourself. And although we were 3 brothers in the school, we very seldom saw each other because we were in different wings of the school, different classes. But it was very comforting to know that my siblings were there with me.
And at the time, the school was had an international student.
It did well, and I think that was reflected in all the political upheavals that were taking place in the 50s around the whole region. Just before the 50s, Israel, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and Egypt, and somewhat Morocco. There was a smaller element. So I understand that originally the school was mainly for British boys when it was set up in the 30s. And then gradually Mr. Halevi saw that he was just looking at opportunities to, first of all, help children who were being mistreated in some countries, and giving them an education in England.
And did the friendships in the school, were they mostly amongst boys from the same backgrounds, or did people outside?
Not really. I think it was more about the personalities. You know, I happened to be a nerd when I was in school, and just like so I tended to hang up with the nerds, and then there were the other boys who smoked or went out, you know, like the teddy boys, and I just couldn't feel comfortable there. So I was, you know, basically confined to the school. Very little interaction, apart from the occasional going to Black Rock for the swimming or for the Palace Pier. Some Arundel Castle, but very little interaction outside of the school.
Did you experiences outside of the school that you do recollect?
Not, you know, the one experience, and again, I happen to have ADHD, which I know it's sometimes somewhat knocked, but I consider it one of my strengths. I got quite upset sometimes going on the school buses, and the double-decker buses, where if I would come into town, and then downstairs was non-smoking, upstairs was smoking, and I'm very sensitive to cigarette smoke, so they would basically push you upstairs because downstairs was full, and I was stuck, you know, sitting by a window trying to crack the window open, and people yelling, you know, close the bloody window, and it just burned my eyes, my lungs, and the mischievous part of me would carry a stink bomb with my every time I got on a bus, and if I was mistreated, I would just sit on Surrendon Road. The bus went up the hill and turned down again, and I would see all the smokers, you know, getting away from the stink bomb smell. Yeah, so they give me a. But very polite. I remember even, you know, meeting policemen with their bobby hats and being very polite, as opposed to what you see in North America now. It's very courteous. I mean, they really acted like public servants and not.
Law enforcers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. No. Okay.
Were there any particular teachers at the school who you remember as being particularly?
Yes, I remember, and you know, as I mentioned, sometimes with this ADHD, where you want to kind of push the envelope, some teachers would knowingly just let you stretch a little bit, as long as it's not destructive or cruel and disruptive. So they would really allow you to just develop. It was not really regimented in the sense where you do this and that's it. I remember many of the teachers being quite influential in that. You know, the thing I remember most is that in giving us some of the kosher laws, the teacher would really emphasize the spirit of the kosher, you know, which is not being cruel to animals, and rather than you just do it and don't ask any questions. So also the spirit of respect for minorities.
Because at the time there were some students of Muslim.
Yes, there were some students, and there was actually two incidents that really kind of emphasized this difference. One day we were walking just up to the fish and chip shop, myself and two other boys, and another three boys just walked up to us and said, "You dirty Jews." And you know, I was like an 11-year-old. I had never experienced anti-Semitism maybe in Egypt. Maybe it's not directed at children, but it really bothered me for a few days. You know, why did we didn't do anything to them? Why did they learn this? Is it in the home, in the school? And roughly about the same time, there was one of the Jewish boys who made a derogatory comment to one of the Muslim boys, and he was very quickly beaten up. It was just a way of saying, "Hey, listen, we don't tolerate this in this school." And you know, I have carried this into my career, where I had managerial jobs where I would witness some racism, And I took that into account. I mean, usually racist people have other performance issues that you can put into account. And I was known as being very, very, very strict, mainly with many black employees, and they really they're saying you're going above and beyond what you need to do. And I said, no, this is you know, the way I've been taught Judaism. If you do not know what that means, what racism and discrimination is, I mean, you just go back to square one. You haven't done anything. Yeah.
So there was a spirit of openness, both in terms of the approach towards how to be Jewish, but also
respect, and also having come from you know, different backgrounds where people face discrimination. So we felt the injustice of it all, and that's you know, maybe one of the just fundamental lessons I learned is if you confront an injustice, the first thing you have to ask yourself is what am I going to do about this, and sometimes that got me into trouble. I'm very proud to say that I have experienced all the possible punishments. The simple ones were writing 100 times, and I will not disturb the class. And I was amazed that I had this gadget with 6 pencils where I would write multiple lines. I'm amazed that teachers never recognize 6 identical lines. And then there was being hit with a stick on the hand, on the bum. And then you went to something called standing on detention, where you stand up all night facing the wall. You don't go to bed that night. And you know, I usually had a smile on my face because of how I earned that punishment. Sometimes I was awakened by rats shuffling between my feet, and worse than hand cross, it was bats. It was a big attic with bats, and I was just woken up at night with the bats. And I was even, you know, threatened with expulsion for refusing to box. I was in greenhouse, and I just didn't show up for the boxing contest. And when the sports teacher came, he said, "You have to box." I said, "Punching a classmate in the face is not my idea of having fun." And he said, next time you don't show up, you go straight to Jake's office. So he took me. I didn't show up. He took me to Jake's office, and those big, dark panel offices are quite intimidating. And he looked at the secretary. He says, "Call Ernest's parents. Tell them to come and get him. We're expelling him." Of course, it was a bluff, but that caused me to to partake of as little as I could. Another of those punishments was taking on a bully. You know, we were sitting in the dining room. We were seated in tables with five boys on either side, and the 2 boys in the front would get the platter with the food, and they would serve the individual plates and then pass down. And there was a little boy across from me who he had these national health glasses, round glasses. He was quite very meek, very gentle, and he looks at the known bully at the head of the table, and he says, "Why do you give us smaller portions you're taking big portions for yourself?" So the bully goes under it and kicks him, and then I realized this, just, you know, this real injustice. So the bully, I say, "Yeah, he's right. Why are you doing this?" The bully tries to reach me around to kick me. It didn't, you know, give points just for trying. So I got up on top of the table, and everything I could lay my hands on went on his head. And of course, everybody, you know, mashed potatoes, gravy, orange juice, and all the boys were enjoying this scene until somebody came down from the head table, one of the teachers, and straight on detention. And funny thing happened the next day. This bully serves me a huge plate. I gave it back to him. And I said, "You give me the same as everybody else." So it's, you know, different people have different experiences depending on whether they're bullied or not. And I think some of the boys were bullied, and that had some it's quite negative effect on their personalities. So.
Where did you go after you'd finished at Whittinghame?
When I finished Whittinghame, that's in 1961. My parents' businesses, my father's businesses were nationalized, and so he immigrated to Canada. He was accepted first to the U.S., but there were two primary reasons why he chose Canada over the U.S. First of all, Montreal is French-speaking, so that was number one. Number two was, with 5 boys, the U.S. had compulsory military service, unlike Canada. And I think in hindsight, it was a good decision because we were, myself and my 2 brothers were, Vietnam War age. So we could have ended up, going to a faraway war that we had, already had suffered, displacement due to political disruptions. So certainly would not have liked to be sent out, to fight in the Far East.
Yeah. And what did you do when you moved to?
When we went to Canada, I had written my O-levels, done very well academically, and I got straight into McGill in engineering, same as my other brother who had written his A-levels, and he also got into engineering. And that's maybe something about the school that influenced my decision, is that whether knowingly or not, we were kind of funneled into streams. All the lawyers, future lawyers, were doing debating societies, and I was extremely shy as a child, and I enjoyed tinkering with mechanical things and maths and science. And there was a biology segment. There's actually quite a. I found it somewhat flattering, a little bit puzzling, that Mrs. Howard, who was the teacher who was teaching the biology, took me aside when she saw that I had signed up for science and physics. And she took me aside and she said, "Ernest, I think you're making a big mistake. You have the aptitude to be a very good doctor, so I think you should be going there." And I kind of, 12, 13-year-old boy, the space program is going up, there's, all kinds of interesting things happening in engineering. And at the time, the people doing biology were growing beans and cutting up mice. So it was. I found it strange, but and of course, all the boys were the big talkers, were doing the debating society, and eventually ended up going into law.
And you've maintained then your relations and friendships with your class fellows and the old boys?
Not really. Again, for the sad fact that once all the classes left Whittinghame, they just dispersed all over the world. And it's just occasionally that we would bump into somebody. I just sat down at breakfast with somebody who was here in 1951, and it's so interesting to look at where their lives took them and how Whittinghame has in some way influenced their decision to go into whatever career they did. And
if you were to sort of sum up your experiences of Whittinghame in a few sentences, how would you do that?
I would say, first of all, a very happy time. I've never felt, I've never felt saddened or bullied other than the punishment, but which I deserved. So it's, but it was quite a happy, I recently tragically lost my son-in-law. He passed away with kidney cancer, and I try to console my grandchildren. And when I tell my 9-year-old grandson, I said, you lost your father, you have your mother. And I said, I didn't see my father or my mother for 6 years. And he was just completely shocked. He said, and we didn't see and there was no FaceTime, no long distance phone. So we literally did not see or speak. And my 3 younger siblings took it very hard, the fact that just overnight, the 3 older siblings disappeared. So that was a very sad part of their development. But for me, I'm quite happy that I came to Whittingham, because that sort of paved the way for me to have a very good career, and as well as some of the behaviors that I learned at Whittingham. You know, it's easier to get forgiveness and to ask for permission. So just go ahead and do what you need to do, and I've done that through my whole career, which has been, in a way, inbred in me at Whittingham. And you know, so some teachers in particular, I find one thing which is quite strange is that the Holocaust was never mentioned ever in the school. I mean, and this is just shortly after the Holocaust, 10 years. And you know, one of my pranks, which I would take back in a heartbeat, was that I heard one of the teachers who was a Holocaust survivor. I could tell you the prank if it'll help understand what happened there. You know, my uncle in Manchester sent me this toy car made in Japan, very well, solidly made. After a couple of weeks, it stopped working, so I took apart the motor, found there was such a fine copper wire that was almost invisible. So I decided that I'm going to do something with that. And what I decided was to take a picture of a teacher with a dunce cap on his head. And so I ran that wire over the sprinkler lines with the dunce cap. And I was sitting in one of the back desks. They were a flip top desk. One of the things at the back had a hole in there, so I was looking through the hole, and the cameraman was right there. And then I was kind of, as I was lowering the hat, I was kind of signaling to the group, the class, to shift to center the teacher on the. And then at just some point, just before the photo was taken, what I saw through that hole was so funny that I just shuddered and lost control of my muscle. And the hat fell on him, and he just went. It was very sad to see how he reacted, and he just went crazy. He ran to the camera, he pulled the film, and I was saddened by his reaction. So I asked another teacher. You know, some teachers have a sense of humor. They would have seen the hat and they've said, you know, Ernest, give me a copy of the picture. But and then she told me, Mrs. Latopolsky told me that Mr. Spira, who was the teacher in question, had really suffered and been humiliated in the Holocaust, and I had, by this act, I had humiliated him. So very, very, very sad. So I've done it. I would have picked another teacher if it was to do again.
But the Holocaust itself was not something.
Not mentioned at all. And I found that a little puzzling, because Jake was an ardent Zionist. He was very, very. Maybe I sensed a kind of not antagonism, but I think he had a bias more towards the Israeli boys than the Middle Eastern Egyptian boys. I just sensed that in the time sometimes when he asks a question, I know the answer, and he never picks me. He's always picking the Israeli boys to answer. But the one thing I did learn in Whittingham was Hebrew. You know, there's a religious liturgy, which is a different, you know, older Hebrew, but the spoken Hebrew, having Arabic as one of my languages, grammar is very similar. The pronunciation. So having all these Israeli boys around, I ended up marrying a Sabra who was born in Israel, and I understood everything.
And you learned that just from here.
Just from here, yes. And there were some boys who were, you know, I guess trying to take advantage of the freedom they had. You know, coming up, smoking, going to discotheques. I was not that kind, and I wasn't here at an old enough age to start dating. There was a different thing that the school would close down for a couple of months in the summer, and the boys who could afford it went back home. And we couldn't go back to Egypt, so we were stuck here in the summer. There was a summer school run with European students, and that's the only time that the girls were allowed there was the whole contingent of girls coming from France, Sweden.
Did you go to stay with your uncle in those
Uh,
summer holidays?
No, only for some of the holidays, like Passover. Once in a while, we would go up to Manchester and spend the holidays there. Not much. One of the things we did, we had school plays, with a lot of rehearsals. And my uncle embarrassed me once because he drove down from Manchester and he fell asleep during the play, and I was a little embarrassed that